Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to discuss the Indefinable, explaining our hobby to normals. So do you ever find yourself trying to explain your hobby to an outsider and wondering if they even get it? In the end, is our hobby fundamentally indefinable when talking to normal people? Now I ask this because I've had two conversations this week that made me doubt my own powers of communication. And if I can't explain the thing I love to outsiders, I have to ask, how peculiar is our hobby? So this week's subject was in part inspired by a conversation with my parents. I've been out for the day, I nipped round for a cup of tea, and I'm sitting there chatting away about the demo game that I'd run at Broadside the weekend before. And you know, I've been a gamer since I was a teenager, so in other words before I left home, but even after 40 years I still don't think they quite understand it. Probably doesn't help that when I was at home I was a role player, predominantly a role player, and now I'm predominantly a wargamer, both of which are fairly niche hobbies, certainly something that my parents wouldn't have encountered. And I was trying to describe the painting, the research, the preparation that went into the project, the Foreign Legion project that I ran last weekend, and how much fun it was to share it with an audience at Broadside. And I was getting the usual polite but vacant expression that I've had off of them for the last 40 years of people that clearly don't quite understand it. And it got me thinking, would the majority of other non-wargamers be as equally as nonplussed? Now, of course, I'm not going to stop trying to explain my hobby to people. I don't expect to turn my father, for instance, into a gamer, but if I can turn just one normal in my lifetime, then I'm doing my bit for the longevity of the hobby. Which leads neatly into the second conversation I had this week, and this one was with a young colleague where I work. Now he's very enthusiastic and still at that stage of his career where he firmly believes that hard work, commitment and dedication will be recognised and rewarded. Now, as someone who has been all of those things and still been made redundant 3 times, I soon put him right. But in the process we got to discussing interesting things to go on his CV, and I mentioned my hobby. 15 minutes later and he still didn't seem to get how I could play a game on a table and not on a console. But when I described all the skills I had developed through my hobby and how I present them on my CV, he seemed to understand the benefit of an interesting hobby on a CV, even if he still didn't get why I used miniatures and dice instead of a handheld console. Now there's hope yet for my young colleague. He's already a computer gamer. I just need to tempt him to the tabletop with some miniatures. So I'm planning on bringing in a selection of my figures, fantasy and historical, just to see how he acts. And of course if he fails the toy soldier test, I'll have to move on to a new target. Now as usual, I'm covering old ground here. Check out this video from 2020 called The Secret Wargamer. And in it I concluded that I felt that when talking to normals, presentation is important because it manages perception. Flatly describing yourself as a wargamer lets the observer apply their own preconceptions and prejudices to what they think of as your hobby. Describing the skills and the knowledge that you've developed lets you set the criteria for how your hobby is perceived. In short, don't go full nerd at first contact. And that's where I went wrong with my parents. I assumed that after 40 years they had some, albeit limited, understanding of my hobby and how multifaceted and interesting it is. Maybe I got that slightly wrong. Perhaps it's a generation thing, and so I was always onto a loser when trying to describe my hobby to them. So what's your experience of talking to normals? Are they as nonplussed as my family? And do you have a strategy for communicating your enthusiasm? And as usual, I'd love to hear what you think and to hear your stories about talking to non-wargamers. So please join the conversation in the comments below or over on my blog, Big Lee's Miniature Adventures. And if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming and of course, keep rolling high.